What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY in the overall market. I'm also going to talk about some very important levels to watch from what's happening with some new developments as we're seeing big headlines coming out. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just about 2.5 weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about Tesla. So, Tesla on the 30 minutes time frame is range bound between its 50 and 20 EMAs. We did dip during the pre market all the way down to about 328. Then we got bought back up. And then since then, we've been for the most part stuck within this range. Tesla likes to get bought back up very close to about 338 to 340. And we have a tendency of getting rejected off 344 for the time being. So I believe that for the most part, I think Tesla's going to be stuck within this range, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If we end up losing 340, the main support below that's around 336. Notice that we actually touched that 2 times today before we saw some buyers defend it. And then our resistance is going to be very close to this like 345 area. So we're just range bound for now, not really doing a whole lot. Now, there's some news coming out about the fact that Tesla short sellers have lost $8 billion since the election, or very close to that much money. I want to make it very clear that there were a lot of people shorting Tesla. We're actually looking at a short interest of about $25.6 billion worth. It's the third most shorted stock in the stock market. And many people have been betting against Tesla, saying it's going to crash, it's going to dump, this and that. Instead, shorts are down about $7.8 billion so far. Now, that does not necessarily mean that Tesla will run forever. There could be some dips here and there, but for the most part, I do believe that this rally is going to continue, just like what JP Morgan is telling us. And that's going to be like a prediction for the end of the year. So just I want to make that very, very clear. If you look at Tesla's data right over here, this data did come from Unusual Whales, so I just want to give them some credit. You guys could see that this is what's happening in short volume. So short volume has these periods where it kind of starts spiking. You guys can see right over here back in like July, we saw that happen. It's been very, very low for the last couple of months. Then as of recent, for the last like 2 weeks, we've been seeing a big surge in short volume on Tesla relative to its overall volume. So we're starting to see an increase in that. There's been a lot more shorting, a lot more volume coming in total. And if anything, the shorts have been taking a big hit. I want to make that very clear that, you got to be careful trying to short a stock like Tesla. It has so much rally, so much potential. It's been rallying very hard, has so much momentum. So if you do short Tesla, what I would say is, and this is not financial advice when I say this, take profits. Don't just short Tesla for like 6 months out and just try to continue to short it forever, especially if this thing starts running again. You have to be very, very careful with that. And, a lot of shorts are still learning the hard way. So just keep that in mind. So, anyways, going back to our economic calendar, we just have a couple of bill auctions coming in at 11:30 a.m. Besides that, we just have Kashkari giving a speech and more Fed speakers like Harker and Barkin. Kashkari's speech could cause some volatility. He is known for causing some. So we'll see what he ends up saying about our economy. Besides that, don't forget we have CPI tomorrow before market open. I'll talk more about that in my next video. Now let's talk about these levels. So Tesla's very choppy. The market's quite choppy, but it has been actually downtrending a bit. Tesla's going to continue to trade between 340 and 344 for the most part. We could have those moments where we dip below it, but then we do tend to kind of like fluctuate in that range for the most part. I think that's what Tesla's going to do for the majority of the day. However, I do want to call out that with this push that came here, we came down at a lower high, came down at a lower high. So it's actually forming a little pennant right over here. But just let it be very, very known that there is a risk of some downside later on, especially as we get closer to like 338 or so. So Tesla could dip a little bit lower later on. It is showing a little bit of weakness here. It might dip more. But for the most part, it's going to be very choppy and range bound. If we do dip later on, don't expect it to last forever because once again, Tesla still remains very strong. What else is dragging Tesla down? And by the way, if we do end up failing to hold these supports, we're looking at essentially 336 as the main support, followed by 330. So watch those main supports. By the way, I think we're going to be range bound and choppy for the most part, but there is that risk of us dipping a little bit later on. For SPY, we're turning more bearish. And I called this out in my morning video that this might try to push for about the 599 to 600 area. And watch to see if we make a lower high. This is the lower high that came. This high right here is lower than this one. And this also resembles the head and shoulders. So SPY is barely at the 597 support. We have resistance now at 598. That's the main resistance. If we can't reclaim 598, there's a risk of us continuing to fall. So I'm going to be looking at the support right here around the mid 596 area. That's previous resistance becoming support. If that fails us, I think we could be dipping all the way down to 595. There is risk of downside on SPY unless we reclaim 598. So keep that in mind. We are looking a little bit more bearish. My prediction yesterday was that ES would kind of pump a bit and start dipping back down to 6,000. Lo and behold, red 6,010, very close to my target. So in my opinion, we got to reclaim 6,025. If we don't do that, I think ES will continue to dip. 6,000 is going to be a tough support, so watch that carefully. I think we could get closer to that, and we'll have to see how it goes from there. But there is that risk of a little bit more downside. For stocks like Nvda, we're range bound. I called out it's going to try to push, but every time we've hit 148 to 150, we have rejected. So we might see something very similar on Nvidia, kind of pushing for that resistance. And then there's going to be a dip back down to 146, most likely coming. For the most part, it has tough resistance between 148 and 150, and we could be dipping back down to that support down there. For Bitcoin, we pumped quite a bit only to start dipping, so we have to try to reclaim 87,150. Otherwise, there's a risk of it dipping closer to about 85,000. It might dip a little bit more, so just keep that in mind. For NQ, this is also dipping. I said this might push a little bit for about, my target was 21,250, and I said to watch and see if we get a rejection. I said there's a risk of it coming down to the lower 21,100 area. So we were getting closer to that. So it does have potential to dip a little bit lower, especially with tech reacting the way it is. And there's also a possible head and shoulders here. I'm seeing something very similar on ES as well. Not to mention um, the QQQ. So we pushed. I said we're going to hit about 515, then reject. We came just short of 515, just short of this imbalance before we start to reject again. So watch 513.38 is our resistance, and our main support is going to be down here around the 512 area. We might be dipping closer to 512 or lower, so watch to see if we get some downside. There's a possible head and shoulders on the QQQ, so watch to see how it goes, and there could be 512 or below coming. Apple's been pushing a little bit. We talked about 225 that's coming, but there could be a rejection here as we're hitting this resistance. So watch and see if we can hold above 225.23. Otherwise, there is a risk of it coming back down to about 223.8. So just keep those levels in mind. For the IWM, we are dipping. I said that if we don't hold 240, we're looking for a move back down to 238, and that's exactly as we were predicting. So just keep that in mind. For coin, we are also dipping here. We have kind of like a head and shoulders. It needs to reclaim 318. Otherwise, I see a risk was sinking closer to 300. For Amazon, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We did try to push for 210, then we got a rejection. We did talk about how that was a possibility too. And we're going to be looking at 205 and then 204.4 as our potential targets. Meta also rejected off 600 only to come back down. We're going to be looking at 580 and 578 as our supports could be dipping lower. Microsoft, we have 420 as resistance. If we can't reclaim that, there is a risk of it dipping lower as well. So we got to reclaim 420. Otherwise, I see 418 coming again or below. And Google needs to reclaim 184. Otherwise, I do see this potentially dipping back down closer to 180. So look at support at 181.25. That fails us, we go down to 180. So keep that in mind. With that being said, guys, the market is kind of shuffling, but I do see a bit of a downtrend kind of coming on SPY right here. Same thing with the QQQ and many others. And then Tesla is, for the most part, just very choppy. But like I said before, there is that risk of it dipping a little bit lower, looking at a shift in its momentum. This is not anything bad for Tesla. It's very healthy. We were due to pull back a bit after so much upside. We're only down 2%. Compare that to being up about 40% since the election. So we were up like, almost 50%. And now we're only down 2%. So don't worry too much about that. It could just be a small dip. There is potential to dip more on Tesla, though, looking at this trend as we're making lower highs here. But for the most part, I think we're going to be range bound, just be very, very choppy, even if that risk perpetuates. All right. So that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. I will be back in a couple of hours for another update. Until then, have a great day and peace out.